Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. I hope you all are doing well. It's our first live stream since Wednesday, which feels like an absolute age. It's only about 4 days, isn't it really? But it feels like it's been absolutely ages since I sat down and since we talked about Everton. Obviously last week we had the extremely disappointing and quite numbing 4-0 defeat to Crystal Palace in the FA Cup. Everton now out of the FA Cup, and then we went straight into an international break, and the last few days have been a little bit manic for me in my personal life and my private life and stuff like that, so I just haven't had the time to basically sit down and do a live stream. That mixed with the fact that there hasn't really been an awful lot to talk about. There's a couple of Everton players out on international duty. Jordan Pickford is doing what Jordan Pickford does for England and being absolutely fantastic, yet still being criticised somehow by journalists who haven't got a clue what they're talking about and quite frankly don't deserve to be in the position that they're in. And, you know, there's a couple of other Everton players, obviously, that are out on international duty. Anthony Gordon scored a really, really good goal for England under-21's back post volley in the week as well. But other than that, there hasn't been much going on whatsoever. The rest of the team are obviously at USM Finch Farm with, not USM Finch Farm, I keep saying USM Finch Farm, just Finch Farm, with Frank Lampard, obviously, preparing for the upcoming Premier League fixtures, and that is exactly what we're going to sit here and talk about today, the situation that Everton are in, because I feel like it's really the only thing we can sit and talk about. Yes, we can dive into it in specifics and maybe talk about the centre-backs or the lack of goals up front or whatever, but I felt like just sitting down today and just sort of talking generically about the situation that we're in and how Frank Lampard can turn the tide at Everton Football Club, because that's exactly what needs to happen. Now, whether Frank Lampard is the right man for the job or not is a completely different question, and that is a topic for a completely different live stream. And I've actually had the conversation with a couple of Evertonians during the last few days or so, and spoke to people in the street and stuff who aren't necessarily convinced that Frank Lampard is the right man for the job, who maybe don't necessarily think he's got the right tools or the right experience to get us out of this current situation. But the reality of that situation is that Frank Lampard is the Everton manager, and Frank Lampard will be the Everton manager between now and the end of the season, regardless of what happens. It is very, very, very unlikely that the board would sack Frank Lampard, given the situation that we're in, and given the fact that the situation that we're in has got very little to do with Frank Lampard. Could he have been better in managing certain games? Yes, of course. Could he have been better with substitutions in certain games, management of certain games? Obviously he could have, but let's be honest, the situation that we're in, the fight for relegation, we're currently sitting, towards the end of March. We're just above the relegation zone, of course, which is just absolutely disastrous. We sit 17th in the Premier League, just 3 points above the relegation zone. Yes, we've got a couple of games in hand on Watford, same amount of games as Burnley, and they're 4 points behind us, so they could jump above us, and we're 4 points behind Leeds United. Of course, they got a big win turning it round against Wolves just before the international break. So, you know, we're sitting at 28th of March and we're 17th in the Premier League table, and you know, as I said, I think a lot of us would agree, if not all of us would agree, that you know, that isn't down to Frank Lampard. Yes, as I said, he could have managed maybe a couple of his games in charge slightly better, but let's be honest, we all know the reason we're in the situation that we're in is because of the gross mismanagement of the football club from top to bottom for the last 5-6 years, from the owner who just shouldn't be allowed to make footballing decisions, a chairman who's more interested in his own personal game rather than the football club, a load of players who simply don't give enough and don't care enough, and to add to that, aren't good enough either, and a period of 4 or 5 years with 6 different managers, all with different styles, all with different philosophies, all with different systems, some, you know, new in football and only young, i.e. your Marco Silvas, your Frank Lampard, some little bit older heads with more experience, i.e. your Carlo Ancelotti, your Rafael Benitez, and yet none of them have been able to get a consistent tune out of these group of players. So we all know that the situation that we're in and the reason we're in this situation is nothing to do with Frank Lampard, in a sense of, you know, being 17th in the Premier League on the 28th of March. However, he is the manager that ultimately is going to have to turn this around, at least turn it around in the very short term of staying in the Premier League, isn't he? Let's be honest, as I said, it's very unlikely that Frank Lampard will leave the football club or will be sacked before the end of the season, and therefore, you know, yes, there's a lot going on at the football club. And yes, there's a lot of change that needs to be made at the football club. I said it a couple of weeks ago. I said that, regardless of whether we stay up or we go down, there simply needs to be massive changes made in the summer, i.e. the chairman needs to be moved on, the CEO needs to be moved on, the owner, for me, needs to sell the club and sell it to somebody that A, knows what they're doing, and B, if they don't know what they're doing, they're willing to employ the right people to do the right job, rather than actually just sticking their nose in and having an input themselves, despite the fact that they haven't got a clue about football. And all of these changes need to happen, as I said, regardless of whether or not we stay in the Premier League or not. Because the worst thing Everton could do, is stay in the Premier League this season, which for me at the moment I would feel like would be a little bit of a miracle from Frank Lampard if he manages to keep Everton in the Premier League. It would be nothing short of us scraping the barrel and sort of staying up by the skin of our teeth, really. And I do think it would depend on certain other teams being considerably worse than Everton, rather than Everton being considerably better than those teams, if you get what I'm saying. But as I said, it doesn't matter if we stay in the Premier League, and we manage to avoid relegation, which, as I said, would be not only massive, are massively important for the future of the football club, but also would be very, very, as I said, very much a miracle at this point, given how badly we're playing and given, how confident the teams around us are and the performances the teams around us are putting in. It doesn't mean that we can get to the summer and sort of just go, we'll write this season off as a one-off and we'll just carry on doing things how we typically do them, because that is just going to cause more failure. And if we don't go down this year and we don't make major changes in the summer, then next year we'll be in the same situation. And as I said, we mightn't be as lucky next year. We might be too deep into it come December, January, and there might be no way out of it. So regardless of whether we stay in the Premier League, if we go down, changes need to be made. Of course they do, because it would be an absolute disaster if we were to be relegated. If we don't go down, serious changes still need to be made, because if we don't, then we're just going to carry on doing things the same way as we've been doing them for years, and that's going to bring more failure, it's going to bring more gross mismanagement, and we're going to end up in the same situation this time next year. Because that's exactly what happens. I mean, you only have to look as close to the January transfer window when we knew we were in a relegation battle. Okay, we brought in Frank Lampard on deadline day, so again, I'm not going to sit here and blame Frank Lampard for any of the signings that we made, because he was literally only announced himself on deadline day, so we had literally a matter of hours to make any sort of signing. So Donny van der Beek and Dele Alli might not have been the right players, but I refused to sit here and have a go at Frank Lampard for that, because he had a matter of hours to do these deals, and I can't imagine there to have been a lot of players that would have really suited Everton that would have been available in that period of time, and would have taken a matter of hours to complete the transfer. So again, that's another failure of the club, not getting that done quicker. Let's be honest, Frank Lampard's name was in the hat for about 3 or 4 weeks before he was announced, as were a couple of other managers. Why the club weren't able to make a decision quicker and weren't able to stick with Frank Lampard and allow him to have at least a week or so to bring in the right players. But the reality is, again, when we talk about gross mismanagement, when we talk about failure from the top to the bottom, the January transfer window is another fine example. We went into a transfer window knowing we were in a relegation battle, knowing we needed to heavily strengthen the team, but also bring in players that were effective and that were going to be able to come in and do a job for us. Now, we brought in 2 young fullbacks who were always going to take time to settle into the Premier League, and were always going to need, months and maybe even years before they're fully settled into being first-team players at Everton. We brought in Dele Alli, who, if you give me a list of footballers in the world, said to me, you are in a relegation battle, pick one player who you think will be effective and suitable in this relegation battle, Dele Alli would probably be towards the bottom of that list. Not necessarily because he's a bad footballer or he doesn't bring anything or he won't be a success in the future, but he's not the type of player you want to be looking at and relying on when you're in a situation like Everton are in. Neither is Donny van der Beek, although he might be a good, tidy, comfortable footballer. He's not really the type of player you want to be relying on in a situation like this. And we brought in El Ghazi, who again, I think we all seem to forget about on a daily basis, because let's be honest, he's probably never going to play a full 90 minutes for Everton. He mightn't even play 90 minutes across his whole period of time at Everton. Again, it was a ridiculous signing made by an owner who just listened to effectively the fella in his ear in terms of Keir Abdichan. And again, for me, just further highlights the disaster that has been Farhad Moshiri's tenure as owner or majority shareholder or whatever you want to call him at Everton Football Club. But now, that's all done now, and that is all in the past, and that's all, gone, and we can't rectify that, and ultimately at the moment we can't change that. We can't go and bring any more players in. We can't, sell some of the absolute shit houses that are here that don't deserve to be here. We've just got to put up with this, and now until the summer, and unfortunately come the summer we could be playing, or we could be preparing for Championship football next season, which would be an absolute disaster. So it all falls on Frank Lampard. He's been the man chosen to come in. I think he admitted a couple of weeks ago in a press conference that it's a harder job than he first initially expected, although he didn't think it would be easy. He knew it would be difficult. And now Frank has got to show his qualities as a manager, and Frank has got to show his qualities as a leader and ultimately a motivator to a group of players that don't look like they could be motivated by anything, literally anything. This group of players looks like they could have the most motivational speaker stand in front of them and talk to them about winning a game of football, and they still wouldn't bat an eyelid and wouldn't give a shit. And that is part and parcel of Frank Lampard's task. And when I say turning the tide at Everton, there needs to be a massive tide turn at Everton Football Club, and a lot of that has got nothing to do with Frank Lampard, i.e. a lot of the players being moved on, the board. Frank Lampard's got nothing to do with Bill Kenwright leaving the club, or Denise Barrett-Baxendale, or Farhad Moshiri, but he has got an awful lot to do with Everton staying in the Premier League this season into next season, and that is his task at hand now, and that is quite possibly the biggest task he's ever faced in his career, both as a manager and a footballer. Because it's great when you're winning things. It's great when you're playing in a team full of leaders and champions, as he was at that, in that Chelsea team, or when he moved to Manchester City, as he was then. And if they didn't win a game by more than 2 goals, they were absolutely fuming. But it's very, very different. It's great when you're managing a Chelsea team who are, fighting at the top of the league, and they mightn't be winning anything, but they're fighting for Champions League places and Premier League, or you're managing a Derby team that are fighting for promotion. It's very, very different when you're managing a group of players who are constant letdowns and just gutless, professionals who don't seem to be interested in wanting to fight consecutively. Yes, they'll do it 1 week, but as I said, 1 week isn't good enough. And B, when you're trying to manage that group of players in a relegation battle against other teams that will seem to fight. Look at Leeds against Wolves. Okay, Wolves had a man wrongly sent off in a disgraceful decision, an absolutely disgraceful decision. But Leeds managed to pull it back. They were 2-0 down. They went and won that game 3-2. Look how much that meant for them. That's 2 wins on the bounce for Leeds now. Burnley are fighting. Okay, they're not getting the results, but they're fighting. Watford fighting as well. So it almost seems like Everton are the only team in that battle that aren't consecutively fighting week in, week out. As I said, we have the odd Newcastle game where we put it in, but then you'd have Palace, and Palace was in the FA Cup, which is a bit different, but the performance against Palace was typical Everton away performance, wasn't it? It was carbon copy of Spurs. We started well, we had a decent 15-20 minutes, and then we conceded the silly goal, and we absolutely felt a bit. And when you look at some of the fixtures we've got coming up, and you look at some of the away games we've got coming up, we simply can't afford to be doing that. There needs to be fight, there needs to be battle, there needs to be desire, there needs to be commitment, there needs to be hard work. This period, i.e. this international break now, where Frank has had the majority of the team together. Okay, he hasn't had the likes of Jordan Pickford, Anthony Gordon, etc. But I feel like the players that have gone away are the least problematic players in terms of the situation that we're in. And he's got to do something to really drill into these players how important staying in the Premier League is, and how important going out there and fighting and battling and working hard week in, week out is. And when you look at some of the fixtures, let's have a little run through the fixtures that Everton have got to play. So obviously we've got Watford coming up, and we've got Crystal Palace, which are postponed games. I don't think Watford's been rescheduled yet. I think Palace has been, but Watford hasn't been. Next game in the Premier League is West Ham on Sunday, 2:00 kickoff down at the London Stadium. I'll be going down to the London Stadium. I fully expect nothing less than a hammering, pardon the pun, but who knows? As I said, this will be a great opportunity for this Everton team to go out there and prove us wrong, show us something different. I don't think there'll be any Evertonian turning up at the London Stadium on Sunday believing that Everton are going to get anything out of the game, because we'll have watched what we watched against Crystal Palace a couple of weeks ago, and let's be honest, that Palace game wasn't a one-off. We've been absolutely dreadful away from home all season. We've been absolutely dreadful at home as well, but away from home has been specifically bad, and that performance against Crystal Palace is was just one of many away. So there won't be many of us turning up at the London Stadium confident of getting something. But as I said, Frank Lampard will have spent an extra week with these players, with no game, with no distraction, with no pressure. And if it was me, I'd have them in every single day. I'd be saying to them, yes, you might usually get a little holiday in this international break. You might usually get a few days away. But typically, when we get into the end of March, we're either fighting for the European place or, more likely, over the last few seasons, there's not really much to play for. We're just sort of getting by, getting through the games, trying to pick up as many points as possible. And in reality, I've got one eye on the summer transfer window and ultimately one eye on next season. And that may be why the players are given that luxury to go away for a couple of days or have a couple of days off during the international break. If it was me now and I was Frank Lampard, I'd be saying, no, not a chance. You're not having a holiday. You're not having time off. You're in here every single day. We're not in a situation that warrants you having a holiday. You haven't deserved to go away. I don't get every 4 or 5 months whenever an international break, I don't get told by work, oh yeah, you can just go off and have a couple of days off if you want. You can just go off and have a few days off. These players are getting paid serious money, and at the moment they're getting paid serious money to turn up and do fuck all more often than not. So you're not having a holiday, I'd be saying. You're not having time off. You're in here every single day. You're working your bollocks off, and you're making sure that when you go into that game against West Ham, you're thinking, we're giving everything here. Plus the fact that West Ham are a very, very good footballing team, very strong team, difficult to beat, managed really, really well by David Moyes. And ultimately, it will be an extremely difficult game, even if we do give 110%. But that's what we've got to do. We then obviously play Burnley away, which is just monumental. Burnley and Watford away for me are two games that not even could define our season, will define our season. If we come away from those with 0 points, meaning that both teams will have picked up 3 points on us, then what you've got to look at is not only how negatively that affects Everton in terms of not picking up any points, but Burnley are only a matter of 5-6 points behind us, as we said before. Watford similarly as well. So if you're giving those teams an extra 3 points, then they only need to pick up a win here and there or a couple of draws, and us to stay in bad form, and they all of a sudden leapfrog us as well. So those two away games I think will be season defining. If we can come away, as I said, we've got to get a point out of both of them, not only because of our situation, but also the situations of those two teams who are in and around us. But for me, realistically, you're looking at them and thinking that's 6 points. You've got to pick up 6 points. And as I said, one of those games is a week on Wednesday, which is Burnley away, which is thinking of that game of football is making me feel sick. Thinking of just how important that game of football is truly making me it's just making me stomach feel all sorts of mad ways, because as I said, this time in 9 days, 10 days, we could be sitting here ultimately knowing the fate of our football club. And I know a lot of Blues are very concerned that we'll go down anyway, but there's still a lot of Blues that are very much of, no, we'll be alright, we'll be sound, don't worry about it. But if we get through Burnley and Watford and don't pick up any points in those two games, then can anybody really sit there and say we'll be sound? We've then got Man United at home on the 9th of April, again a team that have got a lot of quality in there. Are they beatable? Of course they are, because at the moment they're very similar to Everton in terms of falling apart players. It's funny, actually, I was having a conversation with my uncle who's a Manchester United fan yesterday, and he was sitting there and he was saying, it's funny with Man United, because what typically happens is we start games well in the first 10 or 15 minutes, and then the players just seem to not be arsed anymore and throw the toys out the pram. And I turned that to him and I said, that's pretty much like watching Everton, really. So this will be an interesting game. But again, United have got Cristiano Ronaldo, Bruno Fernandes, Edison Cavani, these players who you might look at in a general sense of how good they are in the league and say, oh, they're not great though, are they? But when you're playing against Michael Keane, Mason Holgate, John Joe Kenny, those players could quite comfortably have a field day. So that will be a really, really difficult game, but one that, again, for us at Goodison, our next home game, we've got to, as I said, we've got to get behind the players, and we've got to be able to make Goodison an absolute fortress on that day. Again, we could be going into it having lost 2 on the bounce away from home. Again, I don't want to be negative, because we might get points out of West Ham and Burnley, and as I said, the idea for me is that Frank Lampard has had those players in every single day over the last week or so, and until that game against West Ham. Even if it's not hard, vigorous training, because some people might say, yeah, but Cam, that's counterproductive, because if they train too hard, they won't be ready. I don't necessarily mean hard, vigorous training, even if some days are just light sessions, even if some days are just gym sessions. It's more to the point of not giving the players an undeserved rest, in terms of saying, oh yeah, you can go away or have a couple of days off or this, that and the other. It's no, you're in every day. We won't do hard, vigorous training every day, but you're in to have a team meeting, or you're in to have a tactical meeting or whatever every single day in the lead up to this game. And as I said, we could be going into Man United off the back of a negative result against Burnley, which would be absolutely soul destroying. So the Man United game is important. As I said, we'll have Palace sort of thrown in there at some point. You then got Leicester at home, again a decent side, a really decent side, a side that again not an impossible game of football, not a game of football that you look at and you think it's impossible for us to win or get something out of, but certainly a difficult game, certainly a game that it will be tough for Everton against a decent side. And as I said, for all of these people thinking, yeah, but we'll win that one because we're good at home, Wolves proved a couple of weeks ago that even if you're just a decent Premier League team, you can still come to Goodison and win games, because Everton we're not this team that are absolutely shit away but really good at home and full of great players, and we just find ourselves in this situation because our away form, we're not a very good team. So teams like Leicester and Man United could come to Goodison and pick up points. That's why we have to make it as loud as it was in the game against Arsenal or the game against Newcastle, and make sure that they don't do that. Then we've got Liverpool away, which we're not going to talk about because I don't want to upset myself. We've got Chelsea at home, which of course again massively difficult game. We've got Leicester away, which typically we don't do too badly against Leicester away, but that will be obviously a massively difficult one because we're shite away. We've got Brentford at home, which again could be another absolute season definer, and then we've got Arsenal away, last game of the season, and come Arsenal last game of the season, it might be done and dusted by then. And if it isn't done and dusted by then, let's be honest, who really thinks in this live stream, and whoever watching as a YouTube video thinks that we're likely to get anything positive out of Arsenal away? Yes, we won there last time, but taking away the season where there was no fans in the stadium, when was the last time we won at the Emirates? When was the last time we got a point at the Emirates, taken away last season with them being no fans in the stadium? So yeah, again, our run-up in fixtures is just scary. You've still got Chelsea, Manchester United, Arsenal, all to play. And you look at some of the really, really important games and the games that we effectively will be targeting to win. I'm not saying that we'll look at those games I've just mentioned and write them off, but you look at a derby and you think, what would you rather win, Burnley and Watford away or the derby? And now typically in a season people would say, the derby, because you've got to win the derby. But for me, it's Burnley and Watford away, because that's 6 points and the derby's only 3 points. So I'd say getting beaten, whatever score in the derby, if it means we get 6 points out of those other two games. Because if we're not going to get 6 points out of those two games, then the 3 in the derby mightn't be enough. So, it's all about Everton staying up, and it's all about, I suppose, for Frank Lampard, maybe doing what Sam Allardyce usually does or used to do, and target certain fixtures as, right, we're going to win that one, right, we're less likely to win that one, so we'll just throw 11 men behind the ball and see what happens. Right, we're going to go full out for that one because that one we can win. But for me, I'm looking at Burnley away, Watford away, Brentford at home, and maybe your United at home and your Leicester at home to try and do something. Like as I said, Leicester at home, Chelsea at home, United at home. They're going to be the games that if we win or we get something out of, it will be not a surprise, but it will be certainly it will have to be a 10 out of 10 performance, and those teams will have to be off their day. Whereas your Brentford, your Burnleys, and your Watfords, that they are 3 of the biggest games in Everton's recent history, and Frank Lampard has got to be able to get, I'm not even going to say points out of them. Would I take 3 points out of those 3 games now? Well, I'd take 2. Would I take 2 points out of Burnley and Watford? Probably, given how bad our away form has been this season. I apologise about the sun in my eye, by the way. It wasn't actually in my eye when I started the live stream, and it's just all of a sudden come out. Probably because of how bad we've performed away from home this season. I think anyone would be silly to turn down 2 points away from home, given how poorly we've been. Brentford has got to be 3 points, and Brentford proved when we played them in the FA Cup in Frank Lampard's first game that they're not a very good footballing team. They're just simply not a very good footballing team, so they're very much there for the taking. But it is ultimately up to Frank Lampard, and the question in the title of this live stream is, how does Frank Lampard turn the tide at Everton Football Club? And if I knew that answer, then I'd be being paid an awful lot of money, and would probably be on Everton's board or some sort of advisor at Everton Football Club, because I don't think anybody at Everton knows the answer to this question. I don't think any Evertonian knows the answer to this question, and it's questionable whether Frank Lampard knows the answer as well, but you've ultimately got to put faith in him. And I'm seeing a few people saying, he needs to leave, or he's never the right choice, or he's never the right manager. Again, that will be seen, and again, that will fall on the idiots at the top of the club who may or may not have made another absolutely bad, dreadful decision. But I think it's only fair that we get behind Frank, because he's only just come into the club. He's come in a ridiculously, awful situation. As I said, he's made some bad decisions. He's made some negative decisions. He's made some bad, formation and team selections and stuff like that. But the reality is the situation we're in has got very little to do with Frank Lampard. And that's why I very rarely sit here and criticise him. I'll criticise his substitutions or his formation or whatever, but I'm not going to sit here and have a massive go at Frank Lampard, because let's be honest, it's the players, it's the owner, it's the CEO, it's the chairman, it's previous managers, it's all of these factors that accumulate to add up to where we are at the moment, and Frank Lampard isn't one of those factors. Ultimately the players have got to take responsibility, and as I said, for me, I think Frank Lampard needs and should have had these players in every single day between Palace and now, and up until West Ham, and drilling into them how important it is to fight for this football club and to work for this football club. And what really confuses me with Everton is that, you look at Newcastle, for example, and the players were fighting, and it wasn't a great game, and I refuse to sit here and say we were brilliant, because we weren't brilliant. We were shite. Newcastle was shite as well, and they're shit, by the way. They're not a great team. We were shite on that day. It was an awful game of football. We won it in a 99th minute winner, but forget how bad we were, or forget how bad they were. We worked hard. The players never stopped believing. They never stopped fighting. They never stopped working hard. They never stopped battling. Seamus Coleman went in for every 50-50. Alex Iwobi was chasing every ball. Richarlison was chasing every ball. Anthony Gordon, etc., etc. And you couldn't have faltered the desire and work rate from that performance, even had we have left Goodison Park with nothing. A point, or let's say Newcastle would have scored the 99th minute winner, we'd have all been distraught and disappointed and gutted, but we couldn't have faltered the work rate and the desire of the players on that day. And you look at it and you think, that's what we want. That's all we want. Performances, results. Obviously, we need results, but if the players are giving it 110% and working their arses off and battling and giving everything, then we can't really ask for more. The more comes in the transfer windows when we improve on the players and this, that and the other. But then you look at Palace, and again, we conceded one goal, and visibly the players gave up. We were 2-0 down against Crystal Palace, and I keep saying this because I think it's important to keep remembering how disastrous this actually is. We were 2-0 down with half an hour. They didn't score the third goal until the final 10-15 minutes of the game. Half an hour to go, we were 2-0 down. And yet, the players were walking, they were strolling. Now, anybody who knows football, we all know watching this, lads, there's 90 people watching this team. Every one of us knows. There'll be people watching the YouTube video. We all know that when you're 2-0 down, all as it takes, you can have 10 minutes left, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes. You can have 2.5 minutes left. You know that if you're 2-0 down and you get a goal, that the momentum of the game all of a sudden switches. It all of a sudden switches, and the opposition team go, oh shit, fucking hell, they've got one back here, they're going to pile the pressure on. And often in games of football, you can then go and get a second, i.e. Leeds United, you can then go and get a winner. And I compare those two games, and yes, Palace wasn't a Premier League game, and I understand that, and I get that some people will say, oh, it's good that without the FA Cup, and it is good, effectively it is, I'll admit it. I'm not asked if people can come at me all they like, I'll admit it, it's good that we've not got that distraction. It would have been great going to Wembley, but again, it would have been another distraction. It would have been another game for the players to shit themselves about. It would have been another long trip down to London for us to be disappointed, let's be honest. So ultimately it is good that that's gone now, because it's no distraction and we can move on without it. But you compare our performance against Crystal Palace to the performance of Leeds against Wolves, and yes, Wolves went down to 10 men, and that sort of gave Leeds a bit of a boost, but ultimately, again, both teams were 2-0 down. One team decided, you know what, we're going to go for this because we really need the points, and won the game 3-2, and another team give up and sort of thought, you know what, forget it. Now, had we have really gone for it and still lost, we could have all sat here and said, well, we've lost, and we're out of a cup that, let's be honest, was a distraction anyway, but look at the performance. They worked hard, they battled, they wanted it, they never stopped. So we can take that confidence into West Ham, and we can do that again, and we can build something on this. Whereas now we're all sitting here going, well, they give up. They give up with half an hour, 40 minutes to go again. They shit themselves, they made various mistakes, and they give up. Now we're all looking at West Ham thinking, are they going to do it again? Are they going to do the same? I'm thinking, am I going to travel all the way up to London on a Sunday afternoon for us to be 3-0 down in 15 minutes and the game be over? Or are the players actually going to work hard and give a shit? You know, again, another thing that confuses me with Everton, sometimes we concede and we go 2-0 down, or we go 1-0 down, and the players just sort of throw the towel in and think, yeah, fuck it, can't be arsed anymore. Other times, i.e. Newcastle, we have a man sent off with 10 minutes to go, wrongly, and the players pick themselves up and give that extra 5-10%. Why can't you give that extra 5-10% every single week? I don't get it. And these are all questions that Frank Lampard will have had to have spent the last week and a half, 2 weeks, trying to figure out the answer to. And ultimately, as I said, whether he's the right man for the job for the long term or not, he is the man that will be here between now and the end of the season, regardless of what happens with our league position. And he has to turn this tide. And he has to turn this tide and ultimately do everything to keep us in the Premier League. And you look at players like Nathan Patterson, who was fantastic for Scotland for the time that he was on the other day. I know a clip went round of him taking the ball past about 14 players and then having a shot on target. And some people said, oh yeah, but a shot on target was shit. He didn't score. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He took more players on in that one clip than John Joe Kenny's done in his Everton career. And he's starting every week. He went forward, which Seamus Coleman seems to think he's playing rugby every week because he only ever passes it backwards. Frank Lampard, for me, now needs to take a couple of risks. Nathan Patterson in there. Yes, he mightn't be the best defender, but newsflash, Seamus Coleman isn't the best defender either. Newsflash, John Joe Kenny isn't the best defender. So we're not comparing Nathan Patterson with Cafu and fucking, Jordi Alba. We're comparing him with a 30-odd-year-old right back who's completely out of his depth and shouldn't be starting games of football. And another right back who 6-7 months ago, nobody would have been asked if they'd never seen him in an Everton shirt again. And alright, he's come in and he's worked hard, he's done a bit, but let's be honest, he's not very good. So for me, Nathan Patterson's got to go in there. If you're playing a 5 at the back, you'd have Mikalenko for that natural balance on the left-hand side. Yes, he isn't great defensively, but put Ben Godfrey on that side of him then and allow Ben Godfrey to be the defensive cover and allow Mikalenko to just get forward and focus on putting balls into the box. Another thing for me, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Listen, whether we think he'll stay at Everton beyond this season or not, whether we are happy with Dominic Calvert-Lewin at the moment because of his recent form, and some people are criticising his work rate and stuff like that, that's all, at the moment, that's all a matter of opinion. The reality is Dominic Calvert-Lewin could be the difference between Everton staying up and going down, i.e. we know what Dom can do if you play to his strengths. He will score goals, he will hang around the box, he will score goals, he will take chances. For me, I think Frank Lampard has got to adapt this style and adapt this system a little bit to just say to Anthony Gordon and Damari Gray, if you've got the ball and Dom is anywhere near the centre, get it in the box, throw the crosses in. We've lost Anders Townsend now, who we know is a great crosser of the ball. Get the balls in. Because Dominic Calvert-Lewin, from those opportunities, might score you an extra 5-6 goals between now and the end of the season, and those 5-6 goals might be the difference between Everton staying up and going down. Let's be honest, the tactic of the wingers and Richarlison trying to take everyone on and score isn't really working, is it? Because we're not scoring, we're hardly scoring any. What have we scored? 1 in 4, 5, something like that. 2 in 4, 5. No, 1. Yeah, 1 in 4, 5 games. So, although Dominic Calvert-Lewin mightn't be an Everton player next season, if Frank Lampard might have had an honest conversation with Dom, and Dom or somebody else around Dom might have said, listen, we want to move on at the end of the season. If that was the and I'm not saying that is, by the way, I'm completely being hypothetical, but if that was the conversation, if I was Frank Lampard, I'd be saying, well, I don't know where you think you're going because you've spent the whole season out injured. Rondon's got more goals than you, and you're currently not getting in an Everton team that are fighting relegation. So if I was Dom, I'd be thinking, if I want to leave at the end of the season and go to a Man United or at Arsenal or whatever, I need to really hit the ground running now. And imagine the teams that'll be in for him if he comes back into the team and he manages to score the goals that keep us in the Premier League. And that works for Everton, because if he's going to go anyway, he may as well come back in the team, play to his strengths, let him score the goals, keep us up, and then shake his hand and say, see you later. Because if we go down, he's going to go anyway, let's be honest, isn't he? So, for me, I think we've got to utilise Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And I know people are saying he doesn't deserve to start or this, that and the other. But let's be honest, when he's played, have we put crosses into the box? Have we found him in the box? How many headers has he aimed at goals since he's come back into the team? None. Because nobody's putting that service in. Play to his strengths, put the service in. Richarlison can header the ball as well. Mix it up, obviously. If Gordon or Gray have got the ball, then mix it up on occasions, yeah. But for me, get the ball into Calvert-Lewin. Let him show what he can do. jump, win the headers, score the goals. Even if he scores tap-ins, it doesn't matter. We just need goals, and there's no point in having him on the bench when you're in a relegation battle and you need goals. Make the most of him. Adapt your style to suit him. So if I'm Frank Lampard, for me, I've got to adapt my style to get the most out of Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I'm playing Nathan Patterson. I'm playing as simple as that. I'm playing Nathan Patterson. I'm playing Mikalenko, and if I'm playing a 5 at the back, then I'm allowing them to create the opportunities that hopefully Dominic Calvert-Lewin will score. We need 3 in midfield as a necessity. Alan obviously is still out for a couple of games, so that one will be difficult, but he's got to try something different now, Frank Lampard, and by try something different, I don't just mean change the formation or, alter with positionally a bit, because at the end of the day, he's still playing the same players. John Joe Kenny's still getting a game, Seamus Coleman's still getting a game, etc, etc. Nonsense. As I said, for me, I'm working to Dom, because I think that's what Carlo Ancelotti did last season. And yes, we had, Luca Dean and James Rodriguez and another person who shall not be named, who were creative sparks and fed into Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and that's fine. We haven't got those players now, and that has hindered us massively. Of course it has, it always was going to. But I refuse to believe that professional footballers earning tens of thousands of pounds a week can't put a cross in to a fella who's 6'3" and better in the air than most Premier League defenders. And I say most, I mean 90% of Premier League defenders, and he proved that last season. And it wasn't a one-off. You could say, it was a one-off good season. Him being able to beat players in the air isn't a one-off. That's just him as a player in Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So, as I said, it's all down to Frank Lampard. It's all like me sitting here in my bedroom with the green screen up talking about it and saying it. But for me, it's all down to Frank Lampard. At the moment, the system and the style isn't scoring us enough goals, and it isn't winning us games. Yes, the work rate and desire of the players has got to improve, and yes, that is ultimately to blame for the situation that we're in, but I also think Frank needs to utilise the players he's got at his disposal, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin is the biggest of those, isn't he? Let's be honest. Imagine. Let me just hypothetically say this, and I'll say this before we finish the live stream to everybody watching. There's 85 people watching, by the way. If you could hit that like button, it would mean a massive amount to me. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe. Can I just say this to everybody watching? Let's say we start with Nathan Patterson, Mikalenko, Gray and Gordon as the wingers. Let me just say to you now, Dominic Calvert-Lewin starts up front. Richarlison is in and around there. He might play on one of the wings. And I'll say that we put in, let's say, 10 crosses a game. Going from, let's be honest, we're not putting any crosses in now, are we? So practically none. To 10 crosses a game from the fullbacks, from the wingers, from whatever. Good crosses into Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Am I wrong in saying I think he'd score at least one of those a game? Maybe even 2? And that mightn't seem a lot, but when we're going games where we're losing 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, this, that and the other, and we're not scoring goals, then surely 1 or 2 goals a game is an improvement, and numbers 1 or 2 goals a game might turn the tide, the momentum might be there, we might all of a sudden, if we go 1-0 up away, might throw 11 men behind the ball and defend the lead, like we did last season under Carlo Ancelotti. Can anybody honestly sit there and tell me that they don't have belief that Dominic Calvert-Lewin would bury at least one of 10 good balls into the box? Now, of course, you can't guarantee 10 good crosses, I get that. But if you try them, then a couple of them are going to come off, aren't they? And as I said, Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the air, we all know how good he is. Whether you like him or not, whether you think he'll be here next season or not, you can't deny that. And Jack the Lad says Gray and Gordon's too greedy. I get it, because whenever Damari Gray and Anthony Gordon have got the ball, the last thing they're thinking is to put the ball in the box. But if Frank Lampard pulls them aside and says, listen, forget your little fucking step over and this, that and the other, and your little in and out, and you're trying to take on the wheel and fucking put the ball in the back of the net, when you've got that ball and you see an opportunity, get it into Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It's as simple as that. Crosses into Dom and allow him to beat the players around him. But we'll wait and see. Lavovich says, in reply to the headline, I would say with great difficulty there's been some discussion about Ali, including Ali with the likes of Delph and Davis would provide working class. I actually think we've missed Tom Davis this season. I do. And that'll probably confuse and frustrate a lot of people, but I do. Because I think what Tom Davis does is he'll always give everything. He's a solid player that's sitting in front of the back line. But also what Tom Davis will bring is, even when things are... He's not really a player that seems to lose confidence. He's a player that seems to stay at this level head. So he brings just a level-headedness, every time he's on the pitch. Dele Alli, I don't see Dele Alli. I don't see Dele Alli having any form of impact between now and the end of the season. And there's been a bit of talk about him leaving the club and blah blah blah. I think that's nonsense, if I'm being honest with you. I think that's just easy paper talk, easy clicks. And he might be a success in the future, and he might be absolutely brilliant next season or the season after, and he might get his head down and work. But between now and the end of the season, I don't see Dele Alli having an impact on the situation Everton. But I might be wrong. He might start against West Ham, and he might all of a sudden be playing in a great position, creating chances. Ultimately, Dele Alli is the only player in the team that you're looking at now thinking, could he be a natural replacement for James Rodriguez? Or, he who shall not be named, in terms of playing in that central role and creating chances for the strikers. And if so, then he needs to be in the team. But when he's been on the pitch, he hasn't really showed that, has he? Barring one good ball to Rondon, in which Rondon put into Stanley Park. But one good ball in that period of time isn't good enough. And he's not really going to attack back. He's not really going to work. He's not really going to do all of this and all of that. So it's one of them. Hernandez says, I'm from the States, live right outside Washington, D.C. I met Cam at my first ever trip to Goodison Park right before COVID. You certainly did, my mate. Jack the Lad says, Richie DCL Gordon and Iwobi behind. Interesting. No grey in there for you. Hernandez says, I'm not from Liverpool and I love this club more than anything else. My first tattoo was the crest on my calf. Don't sit here and try and tell me I love them less because I don't live in the city. Yeah, we're not, again, let's not, and I know there's a bit of discussion about fans not from the city and stuff. This is probably the worst time for us as a fan base to be split. The worst time over stupid nonsense things like Blues meaning more because of where they're from. It's nonsense. We all love the football club as much as each other. You see Astro, who's from I think Southern America. I was going to say South America and Southern America. You see how dedicated he is. The videos that he's always involved in the conversation. He loves this club. Hernandez loves this football club as much as we all do. Gorters over from it. We all love this football club as much as each other. And as I said, this really isn't the time for us to be split. This really isn't the time for us to start arguing about where people are from and how much they love the club. This is the time for us all to come together with the players and just say, let's fucking fight for the same thing, because we all should want the same thing. Should meaning the players should want what we want, and that's survival. Slap 5 at the back, get Patterson and Branthwaite to run again, says Ruben de Souza. Interesting. DCL is someone I rate, says Wanderlust. I've never spent a second in the UK. I still back the Blues. There you go. 1-0 up, then lock it up like classic Arsenal, says Wanderlust. Listen, if we can do that, if we can go 1-0 up away and then stick 11 men behind the ball, even if we concede in the last 10 minutes or whatever, then we'll still come away with a point. And a point away from home will be like winning the fucking lottery at the moment. Calm looks like the last game will be my first ever. I live near Emirates, says Unknown. Is right, mate. Well, let's hope that the fate of Everton's future isn't riding on that game. Let's hope that we're safe by then, and we can at least just sort of get through that one and look forward to pre-season and next season. Let's hope that, as I said, we're safe by then. But I'm not convinced. Leslie says Lampard not the answer because he's not bought a budget player manager unless he gets 1 billion work from there. Otherwise, all forgotten about, all good. Well, he's the manager now, isn't he? So we've got to get behind him. He mightn't be the right manager. But he's the manager and he's got to get us out of this situation. USA Toffee says need to put Gordon on the bench, put Richie on the left side, DCL in the middle, Gray on the right. We all love Gordon's work rate, but I just don't think he's quite there yet. Interesting. Cam just saying he misses Tom Davis shows the impact of the mess is having on our brains. It's just that I think he's better than Andre Gomez, and I don't care what anybody says. He's better than Andre Gomez. He's better than Fabian Delph. Is he as good as Alan and Decore? Probably not. Or Donny van der Beek? Probably not. But he's a different option to those players. And I won't sit here and be told that he's not as good as Andre Gomez or Fabian Delph. I simply won't, because it's nonsense. Gordon coming on the 80th minute with his pace and weight. Maybe. Good shout, USA Toffee. Great show again, says David. Thank you very much. Jake says, can Machete forget about Bramley-Moore Dock and actually put some funds into new players, how to use their limbs? I don't want Machete to put... I want Machete to give his funds to Kevin Thelwell, who should be recruiting the players. I don't want Machete to get involved because we've had too much of that previously. Anyway, look, we are going to leave it there then. We didn't answer the question because, let's be honest, as I said before, if I knew the answer to how Frank Lampard turned this tide, then I'd be probably sat on millions of pounds in the Liver building being asked advice from Bill Kenwright and Farhad Moshiri. I don't know the answer. None of us know the answer. But as I said, for me, a couple of things are Nathan Patterson has got to start now for me. I don't care if he only had a good half an hour for Scotland or he only made one good run and we're all overhyping him. The reality is he's young, he's quick, he's determined, he can beat players, he's confident, which is a big thing. He's confident, and he's got all of that over John Joe Kenny and Seamus Coleman, who have been, let's be honest, an absolute disaster for the best part of the last 4 or 5 weeks. I think we've got to play Mikalenko on the left-hand side for that natural left-hand sided balance, and if you're not quite confident with him defensively, then you put Ben Godfrey on that side with him and you sort of allow him to just do the offensive work. And for me, we've got to play to the strengths of Dominic Calvert-Lewin. We do, he's there. We know how good he is in the air. We know how good he is as a poacher. He's not going to take 33 players on and score. He's not going to do that. So play to his strengths, get players crossing the ball into him and get him on the end of that. And, if he scores an extra 4, 5, 6 goals, that might be the difference between us staying up and going down. So, yeah, there you go. There's just a couple of, thoughts from me. Anthony says, "Cam, your team, mate, look at 1-0, 11 men behind the ball, how we can't defend special for now." I get that, mate. I get that, and I'm fully with you. But again, this is where the double face, as Carlo Ancelotti once said, of this team comes in, because we played against Chelsea with a severely weakened team, and let's be honest, a lot of players, who were making their debuts or were sort of, only just getting a chance in the team, and we got, in terms of possession and opportunities, they absolutely peppered us, but we stuck 11 men behind the ball, and we got a point out of it. We went 1-0 down, we come back in the game, and we got a point out of it, so we can do it. It can be done. Again, I just think it's the belief and the motivation for these players. Yes, Cam, I've caught you laugh at the change of stew. He is right. I am going now, unfortunately, mate, but thank you very much. Cheers. Cam says, "Fast Eddie, Goodison is too far for me. Gotta go local." Says, "Unknown is right, is right." Anyway, look, we are going to finish it there. If you have enjoyed this one, please do hit that like button. It does only take a second. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. We'll try and come back tomorrow. I'll try and think of another topic to sit down and talk about tomorrow. As I said, we're looking to get back consistent with these streams. Now, I apologise about the last week. I had various different things going on that just stopped me from being able to sit down and talk about Everton, and there was not much to talk about, was there, let's be honest. But we're back on it now, back on the grind, constant content, consistency, all of that good stuff, and aiming now towards that 7,000 subscriber mark. So if you haven't hit that subscriber button, please do so. It only takes a second. It's completely free. And if you have enjoyed this one, please do leave a like. Massive thanks to everybody for watching. Big thanks to everybody in the live comments. Really appreciate it. If you're watching a YouTube video, leave your thoughts down below. Ruben says, nice one, Ruben. Big thanks for watching. All the best, says Hernandez. All the best to you too, mate. Big thanks for watching. Up the toffees. Let's old Frank can turn it round. And let's just have belief. Belief in him and belief in the players. But, at the end of the day, up the toffees. Nice one for watching. See you after.